Ron DeSantis needs to do some catching up. The Florida governor entered the 2024 presidential race last week, trailing Donald Trump in the GOP primary by an average of about 30 points. At the end of the previous year, DeSantis had been down by more than 10 points. DeSantis's issues are partially related to the former president, but not solely. Republican voters have a slight lovability issue with DeSantis. While Ron DeSantis can secure the Republican presidential nomination, the percentage of primary voters who have strongly favorable or very favorable opinions of the candidates is one of the key metrics I use to analyze the decisions made by primary voters. Because they are all from the same party, most primary voters will favor most of the candidates. To stand out in a primary, you must be well-liked, i.e., have a high strongly favorable rating. DeSantis's performance on this front has declined. In a Fox News poll conducted in December, 40% of Republican voters gave the Florida governor a very favorable rating. That came very close to Trump's 43%. The same poll from a month prior revealed a decline in DeSantis's share of the strongly favorable vote to 33%. The difference between the two candidates' extremely favorable ratings increased from 3 points to 17 points, as Trump's rating rose to 50%. In the average poll, Trump's lead over DeSantis increased by about 20 points during the same time period. Republicans losing interest in DeSantis could be the cause of his demise. Remember that in the 2016 Republican primary, Trump's very favorable ratings were on par with or frequently better than those of his rivals, despite having relatively low overall favorability ratings in comparison to other candidates. Republicans continue to generally view DeSantis favorably, according to the average. Republicans might not view him as someone they would be willing to fight for, but this could indicate that he is no less despised than he was before. There is immediate pressure on DeSantis to recover from his embarrassing campaign launch. This is consistent with some polling on the level of voter satisfaction with a particular nominee. Although it is a broader indicator, it captures the degree to which voters would be satisfied with the primary winner. According to a recent ABC News Washington Post poll, 68% of Republican voters would be content with DeSantis as the party's nominee. Only 22% of people would be unsatisfied. He has two issues despite these being good numbers. 1. Trump outperformed himself. Republican voters would be happier with the former president as their nominee by a larger margin of 76% to 21%. Second, DeSantis' statistics are trending the wrong way. In a survey conducted by Monmouth University in December, he came in first place for satisfaction. Republicans were overwhelmingly satisfied with him as their nominee, with only 10% expressing dissatisfaction. Trump lagged behind him, with a satisfaction rating of 67% to 31%. Provoking the Trump support upon further examination of the data, it appears that DeSantis' issue is that the Trump base has somewhat turned against him. Although Republican college graduate satisfaction with DeSantis as the nominee has remained steady, at around 80%, it has decreased by 20 points, to at around 60% among non-college graduates. Trump, of course, has a huge advantage over other Republicans among non-college graduates in a ballot comparison. Perhaps because of this, DeSantis' campaign strategy has been rather intriguing. He is pursuing Trump with more vigor than in the past. This makes sense given that he believes he needs to defame Trump given his enormous lead in the polls. However, the problem is that most Republican voters support Trump, so it's unlikely that someone criticizing their candidate will cause them to change their votes. If anything, it might lead Trump supporters to have a more unfavorable opinion of the attacker. DeSantis' best course of action may not be entirely clear to me. He could use the electability defense to claim that he would be a more effective general election contender than Trump. Republicans may or may not care about that, according to polling, but it's not as clear-cut as you might think that DeSantis would win the election in November 2024. Though the public national polling is less clear, we are aware that Republican-sponsored state polling has generally shown DeSantis performing better than Trump against President Joe Biden. DeSantis performs just 2 points better against Biden in nonpartisan polls that meet CNN's criteria for publication. In many of these polls, DeSantis is performing similarly. At this early stage of the contest, a difference of 2 points is largely meaningless. DeSantis places importance on the fact that there is still a long time before voting starts. Compared to Trump's, his official campaign is still in its early stages. DeSantis' efforts to combat the woke forces back in Florida are perhaps what Republican voters initially liked about him, and perhaps being on the campaign trail will remind them of this. DeSantis might be able to change the course of events if he puts forth that argument in opposition to letting Trump establish the terms of the engagement. We are aware that DeSantis' actions over the past few months have not been effective, if there is one thing we are certain of at this time.